You learn a thing or two about houses after 30 years on the job. Some breathe, some creak, and some, like Whitcomb House, hum, as if they're remembering things the owners would rather forget. I arrived just before dusk, the Hudson wind pushing the rain sideways. My knees had been warning me about that storm since morning. Eleanor Whitcomb, the hostess, met me at the door. Elegant, maybe 60, eyes like polished glass. She said she invited me as a precaution. When people use that word, they usually already sense trouble. Victor Hale was a guest of honor that weekend. Philanthropist, magazine covers, big donations with small print. I'd crossed paths with his kind before. Men who build their legacy like a portfolio and think charm is a form of currency. Inside, the fire burned too clean and the staff moved too quietly. That's how you know a rich house is nervous. By 7, all the guests had arrived. Coats dripping, laughter polite, thunder making everyone sound braver than they felt. I counted 8 umbrellas in the stand, but 9 glasses were set on the tray. Someone had come early or never left. I made a note of it. I always do. Dinner was the sort of performance people give when they need to prove nothing's wrong. Victor sat at the head of the table, hands steady, voice warm. He talked about his next project, a foundation, something about giving back. People like Victor say that a lot, right before they take something that isn't theirs. When Eleanor poured him a drink, her hand shook just enough to make the crystal sing. Then came the thunder, long, rolling, and close. The lights flickered. 2 seconds of darkness, long enough for a man to vanish. When the lamps blinked back, Victor's chair was empty. His glass still trembled on the table, catching the firelight. Someone gasped, someone stood, but nobody moved toward the door. I've seen that before. People freeze when guilt walks in, even if it's wearing someone else's shoes. The first thing you learn when a man disappears: don't look where he was. Look where people aren't looking. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the empty chair, as if staring long enough would bring Victor back. Eleanor called his name once, soft, rehearsed. The kind of call meant for show, not for hope. Oliver, her nephew, made a move toward the hallway, but I raised a hand. "Sit down, son," I said. "If he's in trouble, running around won't help him. If he's not, you're just spreading footprints I'll have to sort through." He didn't like that, but I wasn't here to be liked. I walked the room slow. The carpet swallowed every sound, but it told its story in texture. One chair leg dragged slightly. A drop of red on the napkin. Wine, not blood. The decanter's neck was warm, though no one had touched it since the toast. That meant someone had swapped or refilled it seconds before. On the mantel, a clock had stopped 3 minutes before the lights went out. Old houses don't keep time, they collect it. I bent down by Victor's chair. No signs of struggle, no dropped glass, no spilled liquor. Just a faint trace of cologne and something sharper, medicine maybe, or cleaning solvent. I'd know soon enough. When I straightened up, I caught the maid's eyes, Martha. She was standing in the doorway, hands tight on her apron, the only one not pretending surprise. I nodded toward her. "Tell me, Martha," I said, "was the house humming like this before the storm, or only since Mr. Hale arrived?" She blinked once, twice. "Since he came, sir," like it was remembering something. And for a second, I almost believed her. You can tell a lot about people by how they move once the lights come back on. Some rush to help, some freeze, some think, and some start calculating. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the storm had found its rhythm. Long waves of wind pressing against the old glass. The housekeeper followed me with a lantern, her knuckles white around the handle. "Every door, every window," I said. "No one leaves until I say otherwise." Eleanor agreed too quickly. That's never a good sign. Innocent people ask why. Guilty ones just nod. The east corridor smelled of wax and wet air. A single set of footprints, Victor's by the size and sole, led halfway toward the study, then turned back. He'd changed his mind about something. That was before the toast. I could still see the mud from his boots drying on the tiles. I checked the study door, locked from the inside. One key missing from the brass rack beside it. The hook still warm. Whoever took it didn't do it long ago. The guests gathered behind me, like a pack, pretending to be polite. Oliver asked if I thought Victor had stepped out. I didn't answer. The man had vanished in a locked house during a storm. Stepping out wasn't on the list of possibilities. Then I heard it, a faint sound from behind the wall. Not a voice, not movement, more like air rushing through narrow pipes, a sighing note that came and went. The kind of sound a hidden passage makes when it's been open for the first time in years. I looked back at the group. No one breathed. Mrs. Whitcomb. I said quietly, "How many entrances does this house really have?" She hesitated, just long enough to tell me she was about to lie. "3," she said. "Front, back, and kitchen." I nodded, though I already knew there was a fourth. Old houses hum for a reason. The study smelled of tobacco and something older, like paper left to think too long. Martha handed me the spare key from the servant's board. Her hands shook, but not from fear. Habit, maybe. Some people tremble when the truth gets close. The door creaked like it hadn't been opened in years. Dust motes drifted in the lantern light, and for a moment I half expected Victor to be sitting there, smiling that polished smile, explaining the misunderstanding. But the chair was empty, the fire half dead, the window latched from within. I went straight to the desk. The decanter here was a twin of the one at dinner. Same cut glass, same amber color. But this one was only half full and colder to the touch. Someone had poured from it recently, then replaced it with the warm one from the dining room. A switch, a quiet one. On the blotter lay a folded note. "We'll settle it tonight." No signature, no time. Behind me, Oliver leaned on the doorframe, trying to look helpful. "That must have been for the lawyer," he said too quickly. "Victor and Glenn have been arguing about some clause in the trust." "Is that so?" I asked. He shrugged. "I just heard them." People lie better when they think you're half listening, so I let him talk. While he did, I looked at his shoes, damp, streaked with garden soil, the kind that doesn't wash off in 10 minutes. Yet he claimed he'd come straight from the drawing room after the toast. "Tell me, Oliver," I said, "did you notice the missing key from this room before or after the storm?" He frowned, stalling for time he didn't have. "I didn't look." I nodded, then turned to the bookshelf. Hundreds of spines, all lined like soldiers, except one, a slim red volume, pushed half an inch deeper than the rest. When I pulled it, the shelf clicked. A draft whispered through the wall. So there was the fourth door Eleanor didn't mention. "Mrs. Whitcomb." I called out into the hallway, voice calm but firm. "I think your house has something to confess." The shelf moved slow, like it had been waiting years to be touched again. A cold breath came from the gap, air that hadn't met daylight in decades. I took the lantern from Martha and stepped inside. The walls were brick, damp, marked with long streaks where water had once run. "Stay here," I told them, though none of them looked eager to follow. Old houses keep secrets in their bones. It's better to meet them alone. The passage turned narrow, then descended. Wooden steps, uneven, worn by feet that hadn't wanted to be heard. I counted 17 before reaching the bottom. The floor was earth packed dry, smelling of rust and mold. A storage cellar, maybe, or something meant to look like one. The lantern light caught something glinting near the far wall, a shoe print, half in mud, half in dust. Too fresh to be old. Victor's size, Victor's pattern, and beside it a cigarette butt, imported, filter crushed flat between nervous fingers. I'd seen the same brand earlier in Glenn Park's coat pocket, the lawyer with 2 smooth answers. But what stopped me wasn't the print or the cigarette. It was a sound, a steady drip of water, followed by another hum, low and metallic. It came from behind a second wall of boards, recently nailed shut. The nails still smelled of resin. Someone had sealed this space tonight. I ran a hand over boards. One moved slightly under pressure. Behind it, something shifted, soft, slow. Not wind, not rats. Heavier. I raised the lantern closer, and that's when I saw it. The faint outline of a handprint on the inside of the wood. Smudged, pressed outward. Victor Hale hadn't vanished into thin air. He'd been buried in the house's own silence. I turned back toward the stairs. "Martha," I called, my voice echoing through the tunnel. "Tell Mrs. Whitcomb we found where the hum begins." They hesitated at first. Everyone always does when the mystery starts breathing. Eleanor stood at the top of the stairs, pale but steady. Oliver lingered behind her, pretending courage. Glenn Park, the lawyer, came last. His tie was gone, his voice suddenly smaller. I asked Martha for a crowbar. She handed it over like a priest with a candle. The first board gave way with a crack that echoed through the walls. The second came easier. With each pull, the air grew heavier, sweeter, the kind of sweetness that doesn't belong to wine or perfume. When the last plank fell, the lantern light reached him. Victor Hale, folded sideways on the dirt floor, one hand still pressed against the boards, the other holding his own glass. Eyes open. No panic, just confusion. Frozen mid-thought. He hadn't run. He'd been hidden. I crouched down beside him. The drink, his glass, was untouched, but the rim showed a cloudy smear, powder residue, poison, or something close enough to it. And in his pocket, the missing key. "Close the door," I said quietly. Not because I needed darkness, but because people talk too much when they think they're supposed to whisper. I let them stand there a moment, staring. Grief didn't come, only calculation. Everyone was counting something in their heads. Time, money, odds. Glenn finally spoke. "So, he must have fallen and tried to get out." "Don't." I cut him off. "There's no dust on his shoes. He didn't walk here on his own." Eleanor's voice cracked. "Then who did this?" I turned the lantern toward the floor, tracing the prints. 2 sets. Victor's, and another pair, smaller, lighter, the sole smooth from age. A woman's shoe. They led back toward the stairs. When I straightened up, Dr. Lila Moreno was standing at the entrance of the passage, calm as ever, and she was barefoot. Most people tremble when they see death up close. Dr. Lila Moreno didn't. She just tilted her head, eyes moving from me to the body, like she was cataloging symptoms, not shock. "Was he breathing when you found him?" she asked. Her voice didn't shake. It never did. Doctors learn early how to keep their tone steady, even when their pulse isn't. "He's cold," I said. "Been gone at least an hour." Her gaze flicked toward the decanter in Victor's hand, then back to me. "His heart," she murmured. "He had arrhythmia. The stress, the thunder." I cut her off. "You were the one who prescribed those white pills in his pocket, weren't you?" She hesitated, the kind of silence that costs more than words. "Yes," she said finally. "Beta blockers." "Then maybe you can explain why the powder on his glass isn't from any medicine I know." That made her blink just once. And that's when I knew she'd seen this coming. Maybe not tonight, maybe not like this, but she prepared herself for something. Her bare feet on the cold stone floor told the rest of the story. She hadn't come down here by accident. Oliver shifted behind her, nervous. "You think the doctor—" "Quiet," I said. I walked toward her slowly. "You treated him for years. You knew his routines, his triggers. You also knew he trusted you enough to drink whatever you handed him." Lila smiled faintly, too faintly. "Detective, men like Victor never believe a woman could end them without touching them. That's their weakness, not mine." The lantern light caught the edge of something in her hand, a small silver case, like the ones for pills or powders. She slid it into her coat pocket before anyone else noticed. But I did. "Mrs. Whitcomb," I said, still watching Lila, "have someone bring me the glasses from dinner. All of them." Lila straightened, face calm again. "You won't find anything." "Maybe not," I said, "but the poison won't lie, even if you do." We carried them into the study. 8 fine crystal goblets, lined up like evidence in sermon. I had Martha set them on the desk one, by place at the table. The fire behind us hissed, low and patient. Glass tells stories. Fingerprints fade, but polished patterns don't. Victor's glass, the one from the cellar, had a cloudy rim and a faint white halo at the base. The others were clean, except one, Dr. Moreno's. Her glass caught the light differently, a dull, greasy sheen near the lip, like something had been wiped off in haste. "Tell me," I said, "when did you last handle this, doctor?" She folded her arms. "At dinner, when we toasted, like everyone else." "Funny," I said. "Everyone else's glass still smells of wine. Yours doesn't." Eleanor stepped closer, voice sharp now. "You're saying she poisoned him?" "I'm saying she's the only one who had the skill, the opportunity, and the silence for it." I turned to Lila. "You switched the decanter before the toast. You thought the power cut would hide it." Her eyes flickered, not fear, not guilt. Something colder. "You think I'd waste poison on a man who was dying anyway?" "Maybe not for hate," I said. "Maybe for mercy. Or money. The kind his lawyer handles, maybe?" I looked at Glenn Park, whose face had drained of color. "You insured his foundation, didn't you? The one transferring control to a board upon his death, and conveniently naming Dr. Moreno as medical advisor." The room went still. Outside, thunder rolled again, like the sky was taking sides. Lila's voice softened. "You think I did it for money? You don't know him. Harris. You didn't see what he planned to do with it." I watched her closely. "Then tell me, because I've seen what he did after dying. He left a trail that points straight to you." She smiled, faint but real this time. "Then maybe," she said, "you should ask what he was hiding that was worth killing for." Lawyers always sweat last. They sit still while the rest of the room falls apart, calculating which lie costs least to keep. Glenn Park was that kind of man. He adjusted his cufflinks, though one was missing, and looked at the glass on the desk like it might rewrite itself if he stared hard enough. "Mr. Hale's affairs were complex," he began, "but all legitimate." "Sure," I said. "Everything about rich men is legitimate until someone checks the small print. Let's start with a clause." He swallowed. "Clause. The one that makes his death worth more than his life." I tossed a folded sheet across the table. I'd found it earlier in the study drawer under the decanter's twin. Hale's will, last revision. Glenn's eyes darted once. "That's how you know they recognize something." "Article 7, I said, "in case of disappearance, assets remain frozen for 7 years. But if certified dead, immediate transfer to the foundation board." Eleanor looked from me to Glenn. "And who exactly sits on that board, Mr. Park?" He didn't answer, so I did it for him. "You, Dr. Moreno, and a trust overseer in Zurich, the kind that doesn't ask questions. Victor dies, and the two of you inherit control of $40 million in charitable funds. Convenient philanthropy." Lila exhaled slowly, her composure slipping for the first time. "It wasn't supposed to happen tonight," she murmured. "He wanted out, Harris. He said he'd expose everything, Glenn's laundering, the fake grants, all of it. We just—" Glenn cut in, desperate. "She's lying. She handled the accounts." I raised a hand. "Save it. You two built this together. But only one of you knew how to make a death look like a vanishing act." The lawyer's jaw clenched. "You can't prove which of us." I stepped closer. "I don't need to. The residue on the decanter will do that. Same compound found in Victor's bloodstream, or will be, once the coroner checks." He looked ready to speak, but his eyes betrayed him first, darting toward the window behind the desk. Outside, the rain had stopped. The reflection in the glass showed his hand slipping into his coat pocket, the glint of a revolver. "Don't," I said, my voice low and certain. "You're a man of paper, Glenn. Metal won't suit you." He froze. For a long second, the only sound was the old clock starting again, a tick that felt like judgment. The room was as still as confession. Even the house had stopped humming. Glenn's fingers twitched near his pocket, the kind of nervous movement that comes before a lifetime of regret. I kept my voice level. "If you draw that gun, the only thing you'll hit is your last chance to talk." He hesitated. Lawyers hate choices without loopholes. Finally, he pulled his hand out slow, empty, but something small and silver dropped to the floor. Not a gun. A key. Eleanor gasped. "That's Victor's." "Yes," I said. "The one he kept on his watch chain. The safe key." I turned toward the portrait above the mantel. "Victor. Painted 20 years younger. The kind of portrait that looks back at you with secrets." Behind it, I'd already noticed faint scratches around the frame. A safe hidden in plain sight. Old trick. People always hide the truth behind their best version of themselves. Glenn went pale. I lifted the painting, found the panel latch, and the safe opened with a click that sounded too clean to be old. Inside, a stack of ledgers, 2 passports, and an envelope marked for Eleanor. She reached for it. I didn't stop her. Some truths have to find their owners. Inside the envelope was a short letter in Victor's hand. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't make them stop. I trusted the wrong people. You'll know who when you see the books. Protect what's left of my name. VH. I handed the ledgers to Martha. Hold these, I said. They're cleaner in your hands than theirs. Then, softly, to Glenn, he was going to the police, wasn't he? Glenn didn't answer. He didn't have to. His face said it all. The fear of a man whose empire had just collapsed under its own paperwork. Outside, the storm broke at last. Whined through the trees, the first cold air of night, slipping through the open window. Detective, Eleanor said quietly, what happens now? Now, I said, the house can stop pretending it's innocent. And somewhere deep within the walls, the hum returned, softer this time, like a sigh of relief. By dawn, Whitcomb House looked smaller. That's what truth does. It strips a place of its charm and leaves the bones showing. The police arrived just after sunrise. Young faces, quick boots, too loud for a house that had spent all night whispering. They took statements, photographs, fingerprints. I let them. They needed the practice. I'd already done my part. The details that mattered were written in my head long before they took out their notebooks. Lila Moreno sat in the library, wrists resting quietly in her lap. No handcuffs yet. She wasn't running. She'd stopped running the moment she realized the poison hadn't worked fast enough to destroy Victor's message. Her shoes were back on now, clean, too clean. I wonder if she thought that erased the footprints below the study. It never does. Glenn Park hadn't spoken since the safe was opened. He kept rubbing the spot on his wrist where his watch had been. I'd taken it from him an hour earlier. The watch case had a microfilm of the Zurich transfers, Victor's final proof. Eleanor sat by the window, letter in hand, looking older than she had the night before. I should have known, she said quietly. He told me he didn't trust them. I thought it was just the money talking. It's always the money, I said. The trick is what kind. She looked at me. What kind was this? Legacy, I said. That's the most dangerous currency there is. Everyone wants to buy a little eternity, and no one reads a contract. Downstairs, I heard Martha talking to the officers. Steady voice, sharp memory. She remembered times, sounds, who refilled whose glass. She'd noticed everything, as housekeepers always do. People forget the quiet ones are the best witnesses. They live in the background. That's where the truth hides. I looked around the room one last time. The empty chair, the stop clock, the rain drying on the windows. All the noise of guilt was gone. Only the silence of consequence remained. When I stepped outside, the air smelled clean, almost honest. The river below moved slow, heavy with last night's rain. Another case closed. But cases like this never really close. They just stop lying. I've told this story a few times since then, usually when the fire's low and the night feels too long. People like to think crime is about greed or jealousy. Maybe it starts there. But in the end, it's always about fear. Victor Hale feared obscurity, the slow fate of a man who built himself out of applause. Glenn Park feared exposure, that someone would finally read the fine print beneath his success. And Dr. Lila Moreno, she feared being used, then discarded. So she struck first. 3 different fears, 1 dead man, and a house that hummed until it couldn't keep their secrets anymore. I still remember the sound that cellar made when we opened it, the sigh of wood, the shift of air. It wasn't just a hidden room. It was a confession. Old houses are good at that. They hold lies like lungs hold breath, until someone listens close enough. The papers called it the Vanishing philanthropist. They made it sound elegant. But there was nothing elegant about a man choking on his own foundation. Sometimes people ask if I ever get tired of these stories. Truth is, I don't. Every case is just another mirror, showing what we'd rather not see. You don't need blood or bullets for tragedy, just people with reasons. When you've been around as long as I have, you stop being surprised by what people do, but you never stop being curious about why. That's what keeps me by the fire, telling these tales. Not for the mystery, not for crime, for the moment when the mask slips and a man finally tells the truth, even if it's too late to matter. He came one evening just before winter set in. Thin coat, notebook too clean, the kind of optimism that still believed truth fit neatly between quotation marks. Said he was writing a piece on legendary detectives. That word made me laugh. He'd read the papers, of course. The Vanishing Philanthropist, the Whitcomb affair, all the names journalists give stories, so they don't have to face the people inside them. He wanted to know how I figured it out. The method, the logic, the secret. I poured him a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. The way you test if a man really wants to listen. He sipped once and winced. Go ahead, I said. Ask. He flipped a page. What was the first thing that told you something was wrong that night? The noise, I said. The house humming. He smiled, thought I was joking. But I wasn't. Every place talks if you know how to listen, I told him. The floor, the doors, even the people. You don't start with a crime. You start with the rhythm. Something always falls out of tune before it breaks. He scribbled that down fast, like it was a quote he could use. Then he asked, and when you saw the body, what did you feel? That one took longer. I stared at the fire until the wood cracked. Nothing, I said. Not anymore. Feeling gets in the way of seeing. He looked disappointed. They always do when the truth isn't romantic. He wanted a revelation, not a routine. As he packed up his notes, I stopped him. Write this down instead, I said. The secret isn't how to solve a case. It's how to keep living with the answers. He blinked. What do you mean? I looked at the fire, at the reflection of old cases in the glass. Every lie you uncover takes something with it. Eventually, you start missing the comfort of not knowing. He didn't write that part down. Too messy for print. When he left, the room went quiet again. The kind of quiet that holds company better than most people do. It's strange, the things you keep. Some men hold on to photographs. Others medals, cufflinks, ticket stubs. I kept a letter, one I never mailed. It's in the top drawer of my desk, yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times. Addressed to a woman named Clara. We met before I'd learned that work and love pull in opposite directions. She used to say I looked at the world the way doctors look at x-rays. Seeing the cracks, not the picture. She wasn't wrong. That's the curse of noticing too much. You stop being surprised by beauty because you're always waiting for the damage underneath. I wrote that letter the night after a case, years before Whitcomb House, when my testimony put a man behind bars and his wife took her own life a week later. I'd done everything by the book, every fact, every line. But truth can be clean and still cut deep. In the letter, I tried to explain that I wasn't heartless, just tired of watching honesty ruin the wrong people. I told her I'd quit, that I'd come back home, that maybe I could learn to see the world without dissecting it. I never sent it. Instead, I kept working one case after another until all the years started sounding the same. Sometimes when the fire burns low and the rain hits the windows, I open that drawer and look at the envelope, not to read it, just to remind myself that every story has someone left behind. Even mine. They say time heals. Maybe, but time also hides. And I spent a lifetime unburying what people hide. It was 10 years later when the phone rang. Same house, same chair, same fire half burned down to embers. But the voice on the line pulled the past up like dust from an old rug. Harris, she said. It's Eleanor Whitcomb. I hadn't heard that name in a decade, but memory doesn't fade when it owes you something. Her tone was steady. Too steady for a woman who'd buried a scandal and lived to host charity galas again. I suppose congratulations are in order, I said. The foundation's still standing. It is, she replied, but not for long. I heard papers shuffle, a soft exhale. Glenn Park's dead. Died last week in Zurich. They called it a stroke. I didn't answer. Men like Park rarely die clean. There's more, she continued. Before he died, he sent me a parcel. Inside, copies of Victor's ledgers, the ones you found. But there's a name in them I never saw before. She paused. Yours. The rain outside hit the glass hard. Mine. Yes, she said quietly. You were on the payroll. Harris. 2 payments. Both before you ever came to the house. I felt the air leave the room, slow and deliberate. She went on. He paid you as a consultant. Confidential retainer. You didn't know? I hadn't. Victor Hale had hired me months before the case even began, through an intermediary, false name, clean paperwork. He'd been expecting trouble. And he wanted me close, just in case it came from inside his own circle. He trusted you, she said, more than anyone. I rubbed a hand over my face. The fire popped once, as if mocking the irony. So Hale had written me into a story before he disappeared. A ghost detective on his payroll, watching a storm that hadn't started yet. Why tell me now? I asked because, Eleanor said softly, someone's been asking about the Whitcomb case again. Not a reporter. A woman. Dr. Moreno's niece. That name landed heavy. She says her aunt didn't act alone. The line crackled, then went dead. For a long time I just sat there, the old hum rising faintly in the silence, like Whitcomb House had found its way back through the wire. I hadn't been back to Whitcomb House since that night. A decade changes everything. The trees taller, the gravel thinner, the paint pretending not to peel. But the house itself still carried that same quiet unease, like it remembered who it had buried. Eleanor was gone by then. Heart failure, they said, the kind of end that leaves rooms too tidy. A caretaker let me in. He didn't know who I was, and I didn't correct him. Old detectives learned that names get in the way of listening. The air inside was stale, the furniture covered in sheets like bodies at rest. Only the fireplace looked the same. That and the sound, the faint hum, still there beneath the silence. It came from below, just like before. The cellar stairs groaned under my weight. I told myself I came to settle curiosity, but that's a lie. I came because guilt doesn't fade. It just changes its disguise. The tunnel was still there, though boarded again, fresh with this time. Someone had cared enough to hide it, but not enough to do it right. A few nails, a few planks, no courage. I pried one loose and shined my flashlight through. What I saw wasn't what I expected. The space beyond was dry, clean, too clean. The boards we'd ripped out years ago had been replaced by shelves. On them, boxes marked with years and initials. One box read VH, another LM, and on the last, in careful handwriting, EW. Someone had been keeping their own archive of the case. Photographs, clippings, letters. Even my own notes, copied in neat, precise script. Someone had followed me long after it ended. I opened the box marked Harris. Inside, only one thing, a photograph, old and slightly curled at the edges. It showed me standing by the study door the night of the investigation, coat damp, lantern in hand. But behind me, in the blur of shadow, was a figure, tall, indistinct, standing where no one should have been. I stared at it for a long time. That night, I thought the house was humming, because it remembered. Maybe it was still doing what it always had, keeping watch. I closed the box and set it back on the shelf. Some mysteries stay loyal to their ghosts, and Whitcomb House had plenty of both. When I reached the door again, I paused, listening. The hum was quieter now, almost gentle, like it was saying goodbye. I used to think closure was a clean thing, a name on a report, a file stamped, a door locked behind you. But that's not how it works. Closure just means you've run out of questions you're brave enough to ask. A week after my visit, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper and a fountain pen I hadn't seen in years. The same brand Victor Hale used. The note read, "You were right about the house." It never forgot. Some of us still hear it. E. I don't know who E was. Eleanor was gone. Maybe someone else signed for her. Maybe it was just the house writing back in its own way. But that night, as I sat by the fire, the hum returned, faint, like breath through a wall. I poured a drink and watched the flames curl around the logs. Outside, the wind moved through the trees the same way it had 10 years ago, the same way it always will. I thought about Victor, about Lila, about Glenn, about how every story starts with someone trying to outlive their own shadow. That's all a mystery really is, a collection of unfinished prayers disguised as evidence. I finished the drink, left the glass on the table, and leaned back. If the house was still humming, maybe it just needed someone to listen. And so I did. Detective Harris leaned closer to the fire, the glow catching the lines of his face. Older now, but still sharp. He said nothing more that night. The rain began again outside, soft, steady, as if the story itself had exhaled.